What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the final episode of the Inner Sea region, a 5-minute tour, or possibly the first episode of the Inner Sea region, a 5-minute tour, depending on how new to the channel you might be, because I'm going to put this one to the very front of the playlist because that's how important it is. I think I have a pretty good idea of what we're doing moving forward at Black Dragon Gaming. But hey, if you've got any requests for what to go in the Friday afternoon slot on this channel, throw them in the description. Before we begin, however, this episode of the Inner Sea region, a 5-minute tour, was brought to you in part by the Inn of Planar Crossroads. Hey, those guys have a thing going on their channel right now. If they get to 200 subscribers, they'll be running a subscriber appreciation one-shot, so hey, follow this card right up here to be directed to that channel. Help them out. Adam, guys, as always, your support means the world. Now let's dive in. Okay, so before we start, there's a couple of important distinctions we have to make. First, different books will say different things depending on the year in which they were published, but the current year on Galerion is 4718, corresponding to 2018, the year that I'm recording this video. When we hit 2019, they'll hit 4719, etc., etc., etc. The second point we have to make is the AR you see at the end of the dates notes Absalom Reckoning. Of course, since Galerion is a huge planet full of diverse cultures and connected to other planes of existence and planets, different people are going to track the process of time in different ways. So if you crack open your Dragon Empire's primer and you see something a little different that doesn't quite match up, you know why. Anywho, with those out of the way, let's get to it. So no one really knows how Galerion came to be. The dwarves think Torog made Galerion. The dragon gods have their own stories for the beginning and end of time. It's a hotly debated subject among pretty much anybody who cares to track the subject. The only thing these guys can really agree on is that for a long, long time, mortal life did not exist upon Galerion. Instead, you had things like aboleths ruling the oceans, as well as a mysterious race known as the Vault Builders. Eventually, of course, mortal life does appear, but how it gets there is a hotly debated subject, and it really just depends on who you ask. Of course, the gods themselves had a direct role in the world in their early days, and you can check out our Wednesday afternoon worship on Asmodeus if you'd like to learn a little more about that. For now, we'll just say that in the early days of Galerion, known as the Age of Creation, the deity Rovagog was confronted and defeated by an alliance of gods and goddesses, primarily through the acts of Sarenrae and Asmodeus, and presently Rovagog is imprisoned in the center of the planet. This is why when you're flipping through distant worlds, you see Galerion referred to as the Cage, because it well and truly is one. So fast forward a little bit. The Serpent Folk were among Galerion's first great powers, but they were nowhere near as great as humanity's civilizations on the continental empire of Aslant. Aslant was a realm of powerful magic and technology whose secrets are still valued present day. Towards the end of the Age of Legend, the Empire of Thassalon rose, founded by exiles from Aslant and ruled by these guys known collectively as Rune Lords. Of course, as we all know from real life history, the thing all empires do is fall, and when the people of Aslant grew too proud of their deeds, their old Aboleth enemies decided to end things on their own terms by destroying Aslant by using powerful magic to cause Earthfall. Earthfall, of course, is the heralding of the Age of Darkness. During Earthfall, the Starstone tumbled to Galerion and created the Inner Sea. Essentially, a giant meteor impacts the planet. This impact kicks off 1,000 years of darkness. Both Aslant and Thassalon are destroyed. During this time, the elves depart Galerion via the Sovereign Stone, which, hey, fun fact, took them to Castrovel. Didn't know that until I watched some stuff over at IOPC recently. Some elves would retreat to the far north or the southern jungles. Some even retreated into the Darklands and became the Drow that we know today. A little more than 100 years after Earthfall, in negative 5133 AR, King Targic founds the kingdom of Targath and unites the dwarves in a common cause to abandon the Darklands. Of course, again, the dwarves of the Darklands feel that Earthfall was the kicking off of a prophecy sent forth by Torog that the dwarves would one day live on the surface, and this kicks off the quest for Sky. In negative 5102 AR, the orcs first emerge onto the surface world before the dwarves. As the dwarves move upward towards the surface, the orcs are pushed up before them. 115 years later, in negative 4987 AR, the dwarves fulfill their quest for sky. They emerge for the first time onto Galerion's surface. For the next 693 years, the Age of Darkness would continue. The orcs and the dwarves would fight for control over what is now the hold of Belkzen, as well as several other regions around Galerion. But in negative 4294 AR, the Age of Darkness officially draws to a close. This kicks off a new age known as the Age of Anguish. It's during this time that the gnome race, fleeing terrors from the First World, arrives in various locations throughout the Inner Sea. But of course that doesn't sound very Age of Anguish, does it? No. In negative 3923 AR, the Pit of Gormuz opens in central Kazmaron, which is just to the east of the Inner Sea, and it disgorges the spawn of Rovagug upon the surface of Galerion for the first time. Also during the Age of Anguish, the Gistka Imperium, another one of Galerion's ancient empires, is founded. And in addition, the orc chief Belkzen besieges the dwarven sky citadel Kuldukar, takes it, renames it Urgir, which is orc for first home, marking a major turning point for the conflict between orcs and dwarves in that part of the world. But it's not all entirely doom and gloom. In negative 3502, deep in the Mwangi Expanse, a man known as Old Mage Jitembe, along with his 10 magic warriors, bring the light of learning back into a world that's been overcome with fear and despair. This eventually would inspire the flying cities of the Shori Empire. We'll get there in a second, though. The next major event that occurs in Galerion occurs at negative 3470 AR, kicking off the Age of Destiny when ancient Osirion is founded. Osirion would be a powerful player in the realm of the Inner Sea for 2,000 years at its height under the reign of the God Kings. From desert nomads, the Tekratonan League is formed, but Osirion continues to expand all across Garund. The Gistka Imperium collapses in a prolonged series of secession wars, and during this time, the Aeromancers of the Shori Empire establish Ko as the first of their legendary flying cities. Run across the Inner Sea to Avestan, in negative 1281 AR, Taldor is founded by descendants of the Lost Aslanti and indigenous primitive humans. While this is going on the other side of the Inner Sea, again back in Garund, Osirion begins to lose its power. They fail to replace the assassinated governor of Thuvia, which is an Osirian province at the time, and in this process they effectively cede Thuvia to barbarism. In negative 892 AR, Nex and Geb, two of the most powerful spellcasters in the Inner Sea at this time, go to war. Of course, we haven't forgot about the spawn of Rovagug. In negative 632 AR, the greatest of the spawn of Rovagug, the Tarask, destroys the city of Ninshambur and devastates Avestan until it is defeated and sealed away in a hidden cavern. It sounds like nobody brought that wish spell. In negative 473 AR, the Lenorm king Ulvas discovers the continent of Arcadia. He establishes the colony of Valenhall there as an earthly paradise. He's not the only person exploring at this time. In negative 43 AR, soldiers of Padishah Empire of Kalesh claim Kadira in the name of Emperor Adelan IV. Flash forward about 40 years and we see one of the most important events in the Inner Sea come to pass. The dawning of the Age of Enthronement. Ticking over the calendar to the positives, in 1 AR, Eredin raises the Starstone from the depths of the Inner Sea and becomes a living god, founding Absalom in the process. Of course, as humanoids are wont to do, when new things show up, we want them for ourselves. In 23 AR, the first siege of Absalom takes place. The warlord, Viradni Vune's ill-planned siege fails catastrophically. Nex tries in 166 AR, he creates the Spire of Nex in the process, but again, fails. He settles for capturing the Isle of Jalmare in 253 AR. Cheliax attacks in 4137 under the banner of the Mad Prince Haliad I. But before we can even talk about that, we should probably talk about Taldor, because this is when the Empire comes to power. In 37 AR, Taldor's first army of exploration destroys the Gorath Lodge in the Verduran Forest and charts the Selen River as far north as Seven Arches. In 499, the Second Army pushes north beyond Lake Encarthen. In 1520, the Third Army conquers the northern shore of the Inner Sea. In 1683, the Fourth Army maps and claims the land that would one day become Andoran. In 2009 AR, the Fifth Army of Exploration expands through the river kingdoms, and they brush against the wilds of Iobaria at the very top right corner of your map of the Inner Sea. It's not all good news, though. In 2089, the Sixth Army of Exploration loses a powerful magical siege engine known as the Worldbreaker to the Gorilla King in a disastrous attempt to claim the Mwangi Expanse for their own. In 2133, the Seventh Army of Exploration pacifies the Isgari tribe of Kelids, inhabiting the valleys between the Menandor and Five Kings Mountains, forming the Protectorate of Isgar in the process. In 3007, Cheliax is founded as the western frontier of Taldor, and that solidifies, more or less, the biggest land empire we've ever seen on Avestan. Not long after this, Tar-Baphon returns to life as the Whispering Tyrant. He unifies the orc hordes of Belkzen and terrorizes central Avestan. In 3754, Taldor would launch the Shining Crusade against him. They secure a beachhead on the northern shore of Lake Encarthen in Ustalav in 3801. In 3818, as the conflict continues, the Knights of Ozum summon Aranzi, the warrior goddess herald of Eredin. Just 5 years later, Tar-Baphon humiliates and kills her. 4 years later, in 3827, the Whispering Tyrant is defeated and imprisoned in Gallowspire. The next year, the Shining Crusade officially comes to an end with the founding of Last Wall, a holding of Taldor, tasked with watching over the Whispering Tyrant's prison. Just 4 years later, in 3832, the heroine of the Shining Crusade herself, Iomedae, successfully attempts the test of the Starstone and becomes Eredin's herald. So yeah, lots of fame and glory in defeating evil and conquering the wilderness, but it's not to last. In 4079 AR, the Khadiran army crosses Taldor's southern border. 2 years later, the Chelish king, Aspex the Even-Tongued, breaks away from Taldor, claims Andoran and the winged folk of the Devil's Perch, you might know them as the Strix, by diplomacy, as well as Galt and Isgar by force. This kicks off a decade-long power grab, known today as the Even-Tongued Conquest, and greatly undermines Taldan influence throughout the region. This is where we see the empire slowly begin to fall apart. Across the rest of the Age of Enthronement, Cheliax would continue to expand its holdings. In 4138, they established the colony of Sargava on Garun's western coast, and in 4305, King Haliad III launches the Wars of Expansion, claiming lands in Multhun and Varizia. The struggle lasts for more than a century and spans the reign of 5 Chelish monarchs, and it is known today as the Ever War. Nidal would fall to Cheliax in 4338, and in 4407, Cheliax founds Korvoza in the northern frontier region of Varizia. Cheliax does try to expand farther into Varizia as well as the hold of Velkzen, but in 4410, they cede their territorial ambitions, and officially, the Ever War comes to an end. But that isn't to say the expansion is over. In 4584, Chelish explorers from Korvoza do settle Magnimar. As the dust begins to settle upon the breaking of Taldor and the expanding of Cheliax, in 4603, Taldor and Qadira reach an uneasy peace. But of course, they aren't the only people running across the Inner Sea doing all this crazy stuff. So we're going to backtrack real quick. In 563 AR, Kibin Sald, the legendary Maharaja of Vudra himself, spends a decade on the Isle of Jalmaray and brings Vudran culture to the Inner Sea. The Vudrani Rajas would return in 2822, wresting control of Jalmaray from the decadent Archlords of Nex, which was probably pretty easy for them because in 576 AR, Nex vanishes from his capital in Quantium during a Gebite attack that kills thousands. Geb attempts to escape Galerion in an act of ritual suicide in 632, but returns as a ghost. In 1532, Qadiran operatives topple the decadent Pharaoh Menendez the 26th, and established the first of a long line of foreign rulers over the nation. In 2253, the resurgent cult of the Dawnflower, which had been banished from Osirion in 2217 to the western deserts, kills the satrap of Osirion and establishes an independent dynasty of Kelishite sultans. Back across the sea we go. In 1551, the dwarven empire of Tar Targath collapses. The Five Kings Wars erupt in 1571, and those wars engulf all of the Five Kings Mountains and many of the surrounding human settlements. This would last until 2332, when the Curse Accord was established in Druma. Orderic Talherk murders his cousin and seizes the throne of the Five Kings in 4369, and that triggers the Forge War. It ends in 4382 with Orderic's triumph. But his theocracy does crumble in 4466. As this is going on, the Varisian wanderers settle Ustalav in 2361, the Oath Wars kick off in 2498, clergies battle for dominance, and eventually the nation of Rahadum is founded at the end of the Oath Wars in 2560. The elves come back to a Galerion changed in 2632 en masse through the Sovereign Stone in Kyanin. Katapesh is founded in 3250. Baba Yaga shows up not too long after in 3313. Conquering the eastern reaches of the lands of the Lenorm kings and founding Irisen in the process. In 4552, Mengkar, the Gold Dragon, begins his grand experiment on the Isle of Hermea. Alkenstar flees persecution in 4588. He goes into the Mana Wastes and discovers Dungenhold, founding the Duchy of Alkenstar in 4601. As all of this crazy stuff is going on, Cheliax prepares for a prophesized manifestation of their god Eredin, which is foretold to mark the advent of an age of glory. But of course, this event never comes to pass. In 4606, Eredin dies. The Empire of Cheliax is left without their divine mandate. The Eye of Abednego is formed off Garoon's northwestern coast. The World Wound opens in the north. Storms rack the inner sea for several weeks. And it's here in the Age of Lost Omens that we see Cheliax fall apart. In 4632, the province of Multhurn declares its independence. 8 years later, in 4640, Diabolists of House Thrun seize control of Cheliax, brutally ending 3 decades of civil war. This brings forth the dawn of the Cheliax we know today, and a dark shadow envelops the empire. It's not long after this, in 4667 and 4669, when the Red Revolution begins in Galt and the People's Revolt transforms Andoran. This is the last time we hear from Cheliax, and truly the last time before the present date that we start thinking of empires at large across the Inner Sea. In Garund in 4609, the Osirians overthrow their Kelishite masters, and Prince Kemet I takes control. In 4707, the pharaoh Kemet III opens the ruins of Osirian to foreign explorers to stimulate the economy of the region. In 4620, the gunworks of Alkenstar are completed, and this is where we see the first firearms begin emerging from Alkenstar to be purchased by rich collectors, curious scholars, and, gunslingers. In 4648, the northern half of Multhurn rebels against the avaricious nobles. The conflict ends in 4655 with the founding of Nirmathos. Razmiron is established not long after, in 4661. The rest of the Age of Lost Omens is marked with conflict and fighting amongst the various small nations of the world. The Pirates of the Shackles unite, the Gorilla King attacks Alkenstar and seizes the gunworks' largest bombard as a trophy. In 4697, the Goblin Blood Wars tear Isgir apart. Gnolls go raiding, giant metallic scorpions capable of spitting fire destroy villages in Numeria. The royal house of Regarvria vanishes in Brevoy. The crown is contested. The Rune Lords stir back to life in Varisia, in a little town known as Sandpoint. It's all a big mess that brings us to the current year. Of course, the adventure paths all fall in this arc. Anything that was printed for Pathfinder 1st Edition, from Rise of the Rune Lords all the way to the stuff we're seeing before the transition to 2nd Edition, and yeah, there you have it. That's definitely a lot of information to process. I'm going to preemptively thank my editor for having to sift through all this. Kane, you're amazing.
I know.
But that's the Inner Sea as we've seen it from the past to today. Of course, when Pathfinder 2nd Edition comes out, there will be a Inner Sea Part 2, where we see new nations formed, the other nations of the Inner Sea affected by the adventure paths, and when we have that information, we'll cover it right here. We're going to cover all the rest of Galerion, see the other regions, the Dragon Empires, Arcadia, Ioberia, Casmeron, all this super cool, super flavorful stuff we've got all across Galerion. We're going to bring it to you. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out through the weeks and weeks of one of the oldest video series on this channel. Or, hey, if you're new, get ready to dive into a bunch of sweet information about Inner Sea regions. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. We'll see you next time.